Hello, everyone. So great to see you, or your little squares at least, in this new format that we all live in. Um, this is the very first concert that we have in the Cone series for this year. And as you know, like so much of the rest of our lives, we have moved completely virtual. We have a concert scheduled live in Wolfenson Hall in April. And I'm seriously hoping that the world will be healed enough by then so that we will be able to do it. But until then, the other three concerts that we are doing are going to be virtual. So this is the first series of the year and of this virtual series as well. So for those of you who were here for our concerts last year, you know that the series for last year, this year, and next year that I had proposed was that every concert would be on looking at a different definition of virtuosity. The idea that what you are experiencing in a concert is a problem to be solved, and that a composer or performer may set out in front of you something which is very difficult to overcome. And part of the excitement of watching the concert is seeing that problem overcome. So I don't know if any of you saw the program notes, which I wrote, but it seems like at this moment we are all virtuosic. This is an incredibly difficult time for all of us, and we are all trying to overcome this. So just the fact that we are all here, trying to have a concert, trying to be in each other's presence and enjoy this music, that is an act of virtuosity in itself. So, I didn't imagine when I titled the series that you would all become the subjects of the series, but I guess I'm happy that we can all be together here doing this. There are other things coming up in the series as well. Just to remind you, the next concert in the Cone series is the 21st of November. And that is an amazing pianist named Matthew Shipp. And one of the things which is incredible about that concert is it will be improvised. So he's an amazing someone who comes out of the avant-garde jazz world. But that is a concert where I have the record of his. I said, I really love this record. I'm listening to it all the time. I really want you to come and do this performance. And he said, okay, that's great. You can have me come. It's going to be completely different from the record that you have because it is made up on the spot mostly. And so that seems like a definition of virtuosity to me, a kind of spontaneity. So that's the 21st of November. We also have a few more things coming up in our Salon series. So November 5th, we have the great music critic Alex Ross, who's going to be talking about his new book, Wagnerism, which is amazing. And on December 3rd, we have the translator Emily Wilson, who's going to be reading to us from her new translation of the Iliad. Her translation of the Odyssey was, a spectacular bestseller. So I think the world is very excited that she's continuing on to the Iliad. So the virtuosity which we have tonight for Maya, so Maya Beiser, who is one of my longest running and closest musical partnerships and someone who I love and respect dearly. Maya made this decision a long time ago that she was going to build her repertoire herself. And so she was going to play a kind of music in a certain kind of circumstance where she was going to play her cello with accompaniment of pre-recorded cellos. And what that meant is there was no repertoire for this. And so all the repertoire that she was going to play was going to be something that she was going to cause to be created just for her. And so other people can play it. You know, one of the things that Maya did is she commissioned one of Steve Reich's most popular pieces, the cello counterpoint, and premiered it in Carnegie Hall. And that piece has been played by, thousands of other people. But the idea of saying, I need the courage to go into a field in which the repertoire does not exist, that seems like a kind of definition of virtuosity to me. So before we get on to Maya, there are just a couple things to say. The first thing, of course, the most important thing about Zoom always is please make sure that your microphone is off. The second thing is there will be a question and answer with Maya at the end of this show. So the concert is about 40 minutes long, and then there will be as much or as little question and answer as we would like. The way I think the question and answer should work is if you just write in the chat that you have a question, you don't have to say what the question is. Just say that you have a question, and then when we get to the end of the concert, I'll just call on you, and then you will be able to talk directly to Maya and have a conversation, and we will all eavesdrop on your conversation. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to present to you Maya Beiser.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to my home. I'm actually sitting here in my living room. Lots of red, I know, but it's just one room in the house. I'm going to start with a piece by Johann Sebastian Bach. And of course, everybody thinks about the solo cello suites by Johann Sebastian Bach when they think of Bach. And I, a few years ago, did an album which I called Trance Classical, trance as in the feeling of trance. And I wanted to go back to that very first memory that I had of music. And this was the piece that I remembered. I was in my parents' sofa in the kibbutz in the northern Galilee in Israel. I was maybe 5 years old, and my father played this air on G on the, phonograph or whatever we call it these days, vinyl player, and this particular melody just stuck with me from there on as this thing that every time I heard it, it just brought me back to that pure moment of trance before I could even utter and explain what music meant to me. That was the piece that I heard first. So I made an arrangement of that piece for 4 cellos, all of whom I play. And you will also hear the sounds of the record player within the arrangement because I really wanted the piece to feel the way it is in my head. Thank you. I'm not sure if you read David's note, so I'm just going to introduce all the pieces in case you don't recognize them. So the next piece is by the Estonian composer Arvo Pärt. It's a piece called Fretless. It's a very well-known piece. It's one of his probably most played pieces, and it has a lot of different versions. This version is just the pure, I arranged it for the same, just four cellos, and it's just the pure chords. And you will hear there's this kind of drone that happens throughout the piece. But it's a very meditative, beautiful piece. So this is Fretless by Arvo Pärt. Thank you. Um, the next piece is written for me by my friend Osvaldo Golichov. He's an Argentinian um, Israeli American composer. He and I have very similar background. Um, both our parents were Jewish gauchos in Argentina. And long time ago, actually, I asked him to write this piece for me and my friend, the percussionist Stephen Schick. It was a piece for cello and marimba. And after we played the piece for quite a while, I just really wanted to make a multi-cello version of the piece, which I did, and I recorded it on my album World to Come, and since been playing it a lot. It's one of my favorite works, and the piece is called Marielle. It's funny because I see some clapping, but I can't hear it. That's okay. Um, so the last piece is World to Come, which was written for me by David Lang. And there's so much to say about this piece, but I kind of feel like you just need to hear it. It's 24 minutes long. It's a piece that David wrote for me. It was a commission from Carnegie Hall. It was my first big multimedia evening that I did, part of 3 that I did for Carnegie Hall. It was for the inaugural season of Zankel Hall. And this piece just really transformed for me a lot of the possibilities that exist in multi-track cellos. I've done some stuff before that, but I think what David did was really kind of open up the horizon in many ways. And it has up to, I believe, 24 tracks at some point in you know, in the track itself. But it's really, I think, an epic piece. It was written in the aftermath of September 11, and it's about, as I said, it's about 22 minutes long. So I hope you enjoyed it. World to Come.
It's so strange not to have clapping.
I know.
I think that's the weirdest thing about this format is that you can't get the immediate reaction from us. And since we only offer music to each other so we can get the reaction, it's a big part of the equation that we feel it from both sides. So it's strange to just have one side. That must have been really weird, wasn't it?
You know, in a strange way, it's actually kind of, there's something really beautiful about it, because you can sort of imagine the audience, but I mean, so you feel the energy in a different kind of way. But yeah, I mean, it is strange. But it's not very different than, when I just play at home, right? For myself. So, um, yeah,
Which is what you are doing,
it
actually.
is what I was doing. Yeah. But
So, well, that was really beautiful, and thank you for playing my
thank you.
piece.
I think it's
So,
probably, I mean, I'm curious what, all of you think, but I experience, to me, it feels stranger as a listener in this kind of, virtual thing. I think as as the performer, you can sort of get into your own zone and but I think it's harder to do that when as a listener. So I'm curious how people, I don't know, how do you experience that, David? I mean, I find it very hard to really watch a lot of those virtual concerts.
I think the hardest thing for me is that the my laptop has become sort of the hearth of my
I
home,
know, I know.
and every single thing that happens. I mean, I can't fry an egg on it yet, but basically
Right,
everything that happens in my life happens on this screen.
right.
So I think
Yeah,
one of the things that I love so much about going to concerts is that it really is a sort of separate
yeah,
space, is a
right,
separate
right.
kind of shrine to a different kind
Yeah,
of listening and a different kind of experience.
right.
Whereas I might as well be, I'm listening to you and you're amazing and I really enjoyed the concert and it was really fun. But on this same thing, I also do my taxes and, you
Right.
know, and check my
Yeah.
email. And
No,
I
yeah.
wasn't doing any of that while you were playing,
No,
I
that's
have to
okay.
say. Yeah.
No,
So,
but it's true. It's how I feel too. It's just in those moments you actually want to get away from your everyday life, right? And so it's very hard to do that on that little screen. Yeah, we have to find a better way
yeah.
to to do
Hopefully,
that, reincarnate in some.
hopefully soon we will just be able to go back to our real
Yeah,
lives.
yeah, yeah.
If anyone has a question, please just say something in the chat. Or Marilyn, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that it is very strange to be doing it on the same screen where you do your writing and your taxes and on the other hand, I found that it was there was another a kind of intimacy that has another definition. I mean, I can't exactly put my finger on it, but when I wanted to watch her hands, I had no problem leaning very close to my screen and just looking in a completely different way from what I would be able to do in a big hall. I mean,
That is true, and that is
my,
one thing that I
it
think
is it's a
is valuable.
intimacy is the closest word I can get to it. That isn't exactly what I'm trying to say. On the other hand, my sound is lousy, and so I'm very sad
Oh,
about the loss of dimensionality to the tones.
yeah.
I actually have my computer speakers and I have two different kinds of headsets. And I went back and forth, between each piece because one of this headset was better for one of the pieces than the other. So I think
That's
having
interesting.
to adjust ourselves to the technology is very difficult.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I definitely find that listening on headphones is a better experience, especially if you can get a
Mhm.
good quality headphones, then you really can take advantage of that kind of intimacy, because then you really are very close to the music also.
I also do think that there is something really nice about being able to have a close up or, if you're sitting in the back of a hall, it's very different from this experience where we can see you a little better.
Quite.
So I love going to see opera. And so going to see the Metropolitan Opera films is really fantastic because, I don't have enough money to sit very close. So I can never
Right.
see what they look like, but in the
Right.
movie theater, you can see it. So.
Right. True.
So Maya, I want to ask you this question because my memory of your life is that you began as someone who was just a straight ahead classical music person, and then you got turned to the dark side of working with composers who are alive. And I wonder if you can just say something about that, about what caused that to happen and what that was like.
Yeah, I never really fit into the classical music world, and I've known it from a very early age, but I kind of never really fit into any of my early childhood life. I didn't fit into the kibbutz, and so I sort of got in this habit since I was very young to kind of try to see how I can stretch boundaries. And it started from just saying, I really want to play the cello and not the violin. That was the first thing, because they wanted me to play the violin. And I didn't like the sound of the violin. I liked the sound of the cello, and I liked the fact that it was big. I was a little girl, and so playing the cello to begin with was sort of a rebellious act for me at at the young age of 7, and but it also meant that I could leave the kibbutz. And we didn't leave. We didn't really travel, but they didn't have a teacher who came to teach cello in the kibbutz, and so I had to go to the nearest city, which is this tiny little, you know, not very exciting city, but for me it was very exciting. And so the whole journey for me from the very beginning was very. It was just kind of this very strong um, thing that it was like I became my identity became totally intertwined with the cello, and I didn't really think much about that, that it's classical music or what kind of music. I just played the music that I was given to play, and obviously the cello is a classical instrument, and so they were giving me all this, that was the material that I played, and I was, I learned. I was very facile as a young age, so I learned really quickly, and after 1 year, I already could play like all these, concertos. I mean, not like the Dvorak, but Haydn, stuff like that. So I started to play with like little local orchestras and stuff, and then I was discovered at the age of 12 by Isaac Stern, who used to come to Israel, and he would look for talents um, and to kind of nurture. And so he became my mentor. He immediately kind of actually wanted to. He was trying to convince my mom to take me here and to put me in like Curtis Institute and all that. And my mother, thank God, did not agree. She said no, she can't go, and so I couldn't go. I was very mad at the time, but I'm very thankful in retrospect. And so during my teenage years, it was a strange kind of dichotomy. My life was, I was playing all these things, I was winning all these competitions, I was playing all the big, romantic big cello concerto repertoire. I debuted with the Israeli Philharmonic, and all that stuff. But but the music I was listening to was not that music. I was listening to Janis Joplin, and I was discovering all this strange music from England, Eno and others, and I was just really, and it was sort of like the secret, which is I really didn't listen to classical music. So it wasn't until I came here, after I went to the Israeli army. I was in the Israeli army string quartet, which is another story I can tell you at some point. But after that, I came here and I went to Yale, which is where our lives kind of met. But while I was here is when I kind of made that connection in my head that I really need to do something different. I can't continue on this path of just playing the same repertoire over and over again. And for me, I think a lot of it was just that um, I couldn't find myself within those set of expectation that existed in that world. It's not as rigid today as it was, 30 years ago. It was very rigid. You had to, not only that you had to dress a certain way and you had to behave a certain way and you had to, um, you know, yeah, all these things that just didn't agree with me. But it was also you had to play a certain way. There was a certain way that you played Bach. There was a certain way that you played Haydn. There was a certain way that you had to play Brahms. Each piece, and there were all these rules that I felt were sort of infringing on my need to just I don't know, to break out. So during that time, and I don't know if you know this, David, but actually it was Louis Andriessen. I met Louis Andriessen in the first year I was at Yale, and we started talking a lot about kind of what what sort of thing I could do. I couldn't imagine having a career as someone who would just play music that's written for me or just new music, because there wasn't really much of an example. Nobody really did that. And in fact, I was part of this class at Yale, which, was this renowned cellist, Aldo Pariso, who was the teacher. He always said that if you could play, if you can't play really well, then you play contemporary music. So it was that kind of thing. Like if you could have the career that I could had, then why would you give it up? So it was an interesting thing, but for me, I just really didn't want to go that way. So and I decided to just kind of take some time off and really figure out what I'm doing. And it was the most rewarding thing that I've done, because I really kind of created everything from scratch, and just kind of built it and commissioned people like you. And yeah, so that was a very long answer,
Um,
but
but I enjoyed it. I particularly resonated with this one thing, which I think is so interesting when you talk about when you are young and studying classical music. One thing that you realize is that there's all this other great music that's happening, that's around you, that all of your friends are interested in, and that's exciting, and the music that you hear at parties and that you go to dances with, and it's not really any music that classical music overlaps with. So there's a way in which you end up sort of bifurcating your tastes as a classical musician and kind of separating yourself away from a
very
lot of your
much.
friends.
Right, very much so. It's a very isolating exercise being a classical musician. Especially I think in the early years, because you kind of, it's very rigorous. You spend hours and hours and hours of training. Not unlike, sort of very, high. Highly skilled athlete or dancer, ballet dancer. I mean, it's that kind of. So it's a difficult thing, but because music, I think, um, it needs to connect in some way that, for me, it becomes something that comes from you, no matter what it is. You have to be able to internalize it. So yeah, I needed something that felt more relevant to where I exist, as opposed to things that were written 300 years ago.
So we have a question from Daniela.
Yeah.
Daniela, do you want to take the screen?
Yeah, sure. Hi. I was wondering, Maya, if you could tell us about your process of how you decide which parts get played by multiple and then recorded by multiple cellos and how the playback works.
Yeah. Um, well, most of the time, there's a very clear, um, main solo part. And so it's, usually the highest part, not always, but most of the time. And usually there's a melodic, um, part that is the one that gets played live. And really these days, I mean, in this particular concert, everything was pre-recorded, but I also play a lot of things that get, looped live or get created in a live way. So it really depends on each work. And it's a work that I do with the composer of each piece, and usually, um, things are written, in a pretty, clear way. Sometimes it's not, and then we have to decide. And sometimes you realize that certain things really don't work, and then you change. But the process of building a piece like that in the studio is really wonderful. I love doing that because it's just, it's so much of it is about texture and sound and timbre and how you kind of build, all these layers of cello. Um, and it's different. It's definitely different than it would be if there would be eight cellists playing it, because the nuances that I can create, um, I find are a lot greater in this way. And the other thing is that when I play against a track, it's never the same. I never hear the tracks in the same way. This is the interesting thing, even though they don't really change, but they do in my head every time. And the way that I play against them is different every time. So, um, it's, it's, um, I love that whole process.
I do remember in World to Come thinking that I am going to make the decision about what the live cellist should do and
Right.
what all the background cellists should do. And then I remember having a discussion with you because I put some of the more boring things in front for you. And in rehearsal, you just changed it around so you were always playing the fun stuff.
Right.
And
I mean, yeah, that's true. Mostly, of course, when what you play live, you don't want to be in a situation where what you play, you want, in a way, to be kind of the soloist surrounded by your own kind of ensemble, that you created. And and you want the most engaging, I think, part to be the one up front. Because otherwise it's kind of strange if you see the performer kind of not doing much, while there's a lot going on. So yeah.
so, Maya, um, thank you very much. It's been a wonderful evening, and thank you all for coming. And
Thank
I
you.
hope that you will all show up to the next time. I think maybe I'm going to see if I can figure out how to do a Zoom tutorial with everyone about how to maximize our sound, but
Ah,
or optimize our sound. I'll see if I can figure out how to do that. But in the meantime, Maya, That was a beautiful concert, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
And have a nice night.
Yeah,
See you
and be
all.
safe.
Thank you,
Stay well,
David, and
everyone.
thank you, Maya.
Thank you. Thank you.